Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of the Science of Soul podcast. Today it's me again, but this time I am joined by an amazing guest, Imtiaz Chowdhury. He's actually a friend of mine from pretty much a long time growing up, but he's very knowledgeable in technology. I believe he studied computer science, and he's yeah, just very knowledgeable brother all around. And right now he works in the tech industry, and over the last couple of years he's achieved some great things both in tech but also in the Muslim community. So we talk about what's going on now with the lockdown and how that's affecting the Muslim community and people in general, but then we also talk about what the future of our community looks like through the lens of technology and science and things like that. So I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, as ever, please share this with your friends and family. Give us a review on Apple Podcast, on Google Podcast, and subscribe on YouTube, and give us a like and comment below if you've got any thoughts of your own on some of the stuff that we talk about. All right, enjoy. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
How's it going, Imtiaz?
Alhamdulillah, good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good. It feels funny starting a conversation again when we already started a conversation. But this is
I'm not sure what you're talking about. I've literally just joined this conversation.
yeah, just like perfectly fresh and ready on your laptop. Yeah, how's things for you under lockdown and stuff?
Alhamdulillah, they're good. Interesting. I've just moved houses, which is very difficult to do during lockdown.
Yeah,
It's also very difficult to do with a 1-year-old.
yikes.
And when you combine those two together, it's nearly possible. But alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, you had to do it pretty much by yourself, right? Like, I felt so bad that I couldn't do anything.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, it's just how it is, isn't it? It's one of those things.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen. There's a Key and Peele sketch where a guy's like girlfriend asks her to help her move, and he starts finding excuses to break up with her, and then she decides to delay it, and then he's like he finds reasons to stay with her, and when you asked, well, you didn't ask actually. When you mentioned that you were moving, there was a part of me that was like, "Thank God for lockdown! Thank God for lockdown!" Because I would have helped. But yeah, that's bad. That just reflects badly on me, really. I don't know why I told that story. Yeah, man. You know, one thing that I wanted to talk to you about specifically on the podcast was about how, like, when it comes to technology and making use of technology, you're someone who I've always thought of as someone who really has a keen understanding of how technology can be used, like optimally to really help, to really help people, like with things that they find difficult in their daily lives, to make things convenient. And right now is a time, like, because of like the whole coronavirus lockdown and being like disconnected and stuff, where technology is really been super important. So in your life and in what you've been doing daily, like, how have you been optimizing technology to still, to be a dad and to be an employee or a boss or a member of your community?
Yeah, it's definitely a really interesting piece. I'm very fortunate that I work in the world of tech, where being on your laptop wherever you are in the world is your office, and that is the norm. So in a lot of companies that I've interacted with, it's quite normal for the tech companies, or at least for the tech teams within those companies, to be uber mobile and really flexible with their timing. Especially as you have teams that work across in different locations as well. Like, there'll be some that are out in the coast of India, some all the way out in the coast of California. So yeah, you have a lot of extreme time zones as well.
Yeah.
So the tech teams naturally work quite well when they're not face to face. Obviously, it brings new challenges, but what the interesting dynamic is in this particular period is that everyone else is having to learn how to do this. And
Mm,
obviously, technology is a great enabler. Like these days, video calls have become synonymous with Zoom calls. Uh,
yeah.
Obviously, we're here using Skype, which is rather odd that I haven't used Skype for over a year.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, so with these enabling technologies, um, people from across the whole range of different roles in the company are having to learn how they can be as productive as possible in this unique situation, which nobody can ever remember ever happening in the past. What's actually really interesting is people are finding that they're so much more productive working from home in this scenario.
Yeah.
And for a technologist like me, this is like music to my ears. It's awesome because we've been saying for years that that's the case. And a lot of the times it's been people who have um, an old school view, if you like, of what it means to work. And you have the classic manager who thinks that delivering value from your team and managing that team requires you to literally have oversight day to
Mm,
day, and that's not the case, right? So, in the tech world, especially, and in the startup world, what you're seeing is people who are really investing in um, the leadership and coaching side. So they're really improving how they want to go about being a leader in their team. And it doesn't use the word manager at all, right? It's about
mm,
leading the team and it's about empowering your employees to do what they do best.
yeah. Well, so what do you think it is about this new dynamic that's letting people be more productive? Do you think it's not having distractions, or is it giving people some agency in their own world? Like, what do you think it is?
I think the bulk majority is not having distractions.
Hmm.
Naturally, when you work together in a physical office, you go in the morning, you might get a couple of things done, but then as soon as other people start coming in, suddenly you're having conversations, and those conversations might last, a couple of hours sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, it's probably exaggerated. It's a slight extreme, but it absolutely can happen, right?
Yeah.
And that means throughout the day you're losing these buckets of time, and it's not even about the amount of time that gets lost. It's about context switching. So
Hmm.
we know from like reading Scrum by Jeff Sutherland that when you context switch, you actually lose more time, and it's not as efficient to do multiple things at the same time. You should pick
Yeah.
one task, focus on that, and
Yeah.
then only move on once that's complete.
That's really interesting. I I hadn't even though I've read Scrum, I must have completely forgotten the idea of context switching. But I guess now that's given it a name to that thing that I always struggle with, especially as an editor of video. When, sorry, I've got like a really, yeah, I've got Ramadan throat where I can't drink water to clear. um,
No problem.
like as an editor, you just want to work on one thing and not be distracted, because it takes time to shift your mindset to another project, to another set of objectives, and like you said, another context. So that's really interesting. I think I feel like anyway that what's happening now around the world will give everyone pause to rethink how things are in the future. Do you think that's going to be the case?
Yeah, 100%. Even before the lockdown, um, I'd read a few articles that were talking about how the office dynamic had really shifted, like from, the classic office and cubicles towards a really open plan where everyone has a really open desk. Sometimes some companies go into the extreme of just having flexible desks across the board and not having any set desks. So now we will find that a lot of companies will look at whether they can implement work from homes for a lot of roles. And for those that have to be office based, I think you're going to find that there's a bit more separation again. Um, Whether it's for the reasons of this pandemic or whether it's just because it's better practice anyway. There's probably a combination of the two. But certainly for the roles that can be work from home, it's actually a win-win scenario because
Yeah.
your employees are saving a lot of time and energy, and they're actually going to put that energy into being more productive at work. And for the employer, well, it's one less desk cost. So it's a win-win scenario.
Absolutely. I remember when I used to work in London, I was really lucky where I had my own room. And the main reason for that is because I'm a video editor and I need like sound isolation and stuff. So that, that's it. It wasn't because I was any more important or anything. It's just that I needed to have the sound isolation. And so what would happen at first, I thought, wow, I'm really popular. Like people just come and chill out in my room. Um, but really, it was just to come and just get away from the rest of the office and have a chat, and like you'd get no work done because you did like the last person would leave and you'd be like, okay, cool, I'm gonna turn around, start working, and then you hear the door open again and someone else coming like, hey Jubair, what's going on, man? And like how are you finding now at home, uh, like other things distracting you? And I'm kind of like almost asking in a cheeky way because I'm expecting, you have a little boy and, you've just moved. I'm expecting some interesting and funny kind of scenarios that have come up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great story originally for your side. Like, I think when I visualize that being a sole room with sound isolation, I see it like a glass cube where
It
there's a
was a
vacuum
glass
inside it,
cube.
and then
It was a
therefore there is
glass.
perfect silence, and there's like a little pathway that leads up to it, a bit like out of X-Men. Um, Maybe you needed something like the little sign that you get on the toilet that says "Engaged, do not come in." And that way, you would have had no distractions for some time.
Someone would have used it in
Interesting
the
dynamic
toilet.
at home for sure. Absolutely, it's actually very difficult. I miss times when sometimes you would be able to really isolate yourself and go into deep focus. Can't do that right now in lockdown, right? So, uh, little Issa is actually sitting with us all the time. One of us is looking after him. He's not able to go to his childminder. He's not able to go to his grandparents.
Yeah.
Um, and on top of that, my wife actually started a new role as well. So uh, naturally, I want to take as much time with Issa at this time so that she can focus on getting her new role up and running.
Yeah.
So it's very tricky. So you end up having to constantly play tag team between one parent and another to see, when you can look after the little one. But at the same time, there are some meetings that you can't control. So sometimes you'd have meetings that happen at the same time, and therefore he'd be jumping around from one to another. Certainly, both of our companies have seen Issa's face many times. Um, he has the funniest comments to make it sometimes because it's not any words, it's just noises.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely quite tricky, and it doesn't allow you to have a 9 to 5.
Okay.
Not that my world was a 9 to 5 anyway,
Yeah.
but a lot of people are finding that when they have kids, you're actually getting started a bit earlier, and then you're working a bit later in because you're trying to cover those gaps where you're having to just spend some time out.
Okay. Yeah. I guess that's the norm for everyone now. One thing that I wanted to ask you specifically about, because you're the founder of uh, Reading Muslim, which for those people who don't know is, I guess you could say, like a collective of people that is there to facilitate like the betterment of our society in Reading, and it's a collective of Muslims. Now, what's amazing about it is that it's brought all these Muslims from different backgrounds, slightly different ideologies. I won't say sects, but at least different understandings and schools of thought together, communicating, sharing what's going on, and you did that. I mean, obviously, you did it through leadership and your own personality and your values, but you also did it through technology, and you did it through, like, you've just created an app, and previous to that, it was, you were utilizing WhatsApp. It feels like in the run up to like the lockdown and even during the lockdown, the communication that was happening over that WhatsApp group was super important for looking out for people and for providing information and stuff. Um, like, what are your thoughts on technology as a means to bring the community together, because like it's Ramadan now, and we would, like in normal circumstances, we'd be in the masjid and together at each of the houses. Like, what's your thoughts on using technology to not like almost for religious and social purposes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important, and a lot of masajid are doing really well with this, where they are generating the right content and they're live streaming so that people can feel that they've got that attachment to their masjid still. And it's really important, because ultimately we know that we're travelers in this world. We're here for just a mere second. So everything that we want to do throughout our day is all about, investing in our afterlife. So the more time you can spend in that calming feel of engaging in conversations or listening to content which is going to be beneficial, then that just is, it's like mind well-being, right? It's one and the same. That's why, alhamdulillah, a lot of Muslims are generally quite mindful, because they have that higher sense of purpose.
Yeah.
It's the same on the social side as well, right? It's really important to have those social conversations with neighbors and things. You can still interact like over some space. Like if you're in the garden, they're in the garden, you can speak over your fence, you can go to the front door, just keep that distance, but still do have that engagement. It's really important. And obviously, again, in our religion, we know that it's really important to look after your neighbors, and your neighbors are up to 40 houses down the road. So, we all have responsibilities, especially in these times. But even friends and family that are further away, like, do give them video calls and check in on them, because you never know who might be just isolated and thinking that nobody's there to listen to them. But that technology is available for us, and it doesn't actually cost anything either, and it's awesome.
To dig a little bit deeper into the religious side of things, and especially what you achieved with Reading Muslim, I almost feel like technology, I mean, obviously your values play a huge part in it, and without your values, that technology that you use could have been misused, or even not like just completely ignored altogether, like the potential that it has. But with Reading Muslim specifically, you were able to bring people together who might not otherwise interact on that level of sharing their religious views and their, like what's going on in their sort of mini microcosms. And I felt like, I felt very optimistic when I saw it. And even we were chatting about it the other day, that it's happening, like people are like really, they're engaging. How do you feel about the idea that like technology in that instance was a means to almost like break down barriers that for almost centuries have been put up between our communities?
Yeah, no, definitely, it's an important thing. I should obviously firstly state for your viewers that you're also a co-founder of Reading Muslim, and when we spoke about these scenarios that exist, especially in the Reading community, it's an unfortunate case of small segregations because of small differences in values. And that's what we wanted to eliminate, because ultimately all Muslims believe that what's really important in this world is having one ummah. Now, to do that, all you need to do is just focus on the most important thing, right? It's the most important thing. We believe in Allah and His Messenger. All of the Muslims that we know believe in this. Subhanallah. So, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, we have focused on that area and said, look, cast aside the differences what we might have, but let's bring together the various areas of communities in Reading, so that we as a group can serve all of the Muslims across the board in Reading and our surrounding areas. So, for example, if somebody was on the east coast of Reading and they normally go to Aisha Masjid, and they don't normally have any interaction with, let's say, Abu Bakr Masjid, they might still want to be interested in what's going on. And this is a platform where they can just be aware of what's going on in Reading.
It's awesome. It's absolutely awesome. I mean, to play like devil's advocate, astaghfirullah, what about the idea that, oh, that's, what you're saying is very utopian and, like can't be done, and it's something that people, would never, they'd never buy into, like, what about something like that? What would you say to that kind of notion?
Yeah, it's completely normal, and to be fair, like we have heard those comments from various people. I think it's understandable, and it comes from a good place. It's because they feel that some energy has been, or a lot of energy has been put into trying to achieve this in the past, and it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
The best way to go about it is actually little bit by bit show that you can make that difference. And what helps is that obviously as time moves on, there's a new generation coming into age, and therefore the mindset is very different because the younger generation is naturally more social with one another, and they're naturally more flexible and open to differences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you feel like through, I mean, I'm not going to say it's completely down to the use of the technology. It's also, like you said, it's the dynamic of the particular demographic, that age group that's coming to age, their values and the way they look at things. But do you think there's going to be like a slight evolution, or even evolution is a tricky word. A lot of people don't like that word. Do you think there's going to be some kind of development or progression in the way that the ummah looks and the way that the ummah is characterized over the years through the use of this type of platform and the use of this type of technology?
I think potentially. It's a very difficult question to answer. Obviously, it's
Yeah.
trying to predict the future, which is impossible.
Yeah.
I think there are elements of it which will naturally change how we interact with one another and how well our communication is between one another.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think what matters most is the mindset of people and how we interact with one another generally outside of the tech.
Yeah.
And it's the tech is essentially just an enabler to make things easier and facilitate for us.
Absolutely.
But really, it is down to us as individuals to have the same vision and to put to action what we want to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. So you almost saying that it's kind of like the tech is used in the way that the kind of consciousness of the people is, like it's a reflection, or it's an enabler. So that's a great way of putting it.
Absolutely. I think the examples which make it really easy to understand the use of tech are things like when you've got a Ramadan or Eid announcement, right? Mm-hmm. Where you can absolutely have differences of opinion of when the start of Ramadan and the end of Ramadan might be, for example.
Yeah.
And therefore, having the various masajid give their updates, and then for the Muslims of Reading to find those updates in one spot at the same time, also getting it as soon as their local masjid has given that news. Yeah, that's the true value of that technology, right? You're getting that instant news, and across the board. That's something that didn't exist before, and it required the technology in order to achieve.
Do you know what's so interesting about this is that initially when we were like sort of talking about it and discussing it and trying to bring it to fruition, there was a part of me that was thinking, you know what, like people get very emotional and potentially upset when it comes to, when their local masjid is starting it compared to another masjid. And it's very easy to start judging and making fun of people. So there was a part of me that thought, you know what, I don't know, man. If everyone kind of has it in front of them, like this screen tells them all this information. Oh, look, they're doing it at this time, or they've not even given us the update yet, or whatever. It's going to be, people. It's just going to give people reason because it's so clear in front of them on their phone or on their screen. It's going to give them more reason to have ammunition, for judging others. But I almost feel like now, over the last couple of years that we've seen, people give their updates, that potentially this is a means to educate people and almost enlighten them to the fact that, oh, there is another opinion, and you don't need to follow it, and it doesn't need to affect you, but there are people in the community who do want that information. And so it's like giving everyone the information and all the options available has in some way created tolerance and created understanding. Because I honestly, I remember I used to go to my like in-laws house, and I'd be following what like Mufti Numan said, like, oh, this is when Eid is, and I'd go to my in-laws house and everyone's doing it the day before or the day after or whatever, and people would make fun of me, and I'd be sat there going, thinking to myself, how do I, like, how can I not be defensive and standoffish, and over the last, especially this year, like people were sharing their updates as to when Ramadan was starting, and it seemed to me like everyone was just completely, um, accepting and uh, understanding of each other's positions.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's it definitely has that vibe, and I would agree with that.
Yeah.
What's interesting also is that I think people are becoming more conscious that there shouldn't ever be any judgment, and that the difference in opinion is completely okay, and that it doesn't mean the other one's wrong.
No.
The great thing that we have in our religion is that flexibility.
Yeah.
Whether it comes to sighting the moon or whether it even comes to how you pray, right?
Yes.
The Quran says pray. It
Pray.
doesn't
Yeah.
tell you how.
Subhanallah.
So in that we've been given that massive blessing of flexibility and lenience.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. I have to say it's been so beautiful to see, as you mentioned earlier, like these different masajid like putting out like live streams, and making sure that people are still in touch with their their particular their particular masjid, still getting their information and stuff. Some masajid have been lagging behind, and there's been some who, you know, in my opinion, it feels almost like there's been not much effort at all. For someone like you who can see the potential of our community, and can see how important it is to utilize whatever means necessary to keep the community engaged. How does it make you feel, and what does it make you want to do?
That's definitely
Get your
one
stick out.
right. Yeah, I think it is unfortunate because I'm the kind of person who likes to run any project or operation or organization as a business. It doesn't matter whether it's intending to be profitable, but the objective is that you have the right vision, mission, actions, ethos. That's what's important. And unfortunately, where the few masajid that you're talking about, they're not able to see that value, and therefore they haven't put that time and energy into trying to achieve that. So, for example, they'll still have like notices on their walls, but they won't put it on their website, which maybe they don't manage directly themselves and somebody manages it for them, but it's still just one message away to whoever manages it for them.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'm so keen to try and change. At the moment, Reading Muslim is focused around what it can achieve quite easily. So it's the low-hanging fruit. It's what is our MVP. We just want to demonstrate what we can achieve and show what the vision is.
Yeah.
Now, in the future, we would love to invest in growing our network so that we can be proactive in providing that support to the masajid who need that support.
Yeah.
Whereas right now we don't have the network to be able to do that.
Sure. Yeah, I think also as people see the immense value of what's being done, I think they will be inspired and encouraged to sort of pick up the slack and kind of just get moving and start doing things. And also, like you said before, like a younger generation are gonna sort of take the reins. Just, that's the law of, it's almost as fundamental as the law of physics, that this is what's going to happen. It's like the young will replace the old. And so, you know technologies and means and methods that are being used by the young people are just going to naturally just sort of come in. And so that's kind of something to be optimistic about. Okay, so now, if it's cool with you, I want to take the conversation into like an area which is a little bit more, I guess it's a little bit more abstract and a little bit more, hard to foresee. But I feel like if there's anyone who can put their expertise towards this, it's you. So far, the technologies that we've been using, especially during the lockdown, has been stuff that has been around for a little while, and it's stuff that it's very prominent in the business world, where people need to have meetings. I'm talking about video calls and things like that, and streaming. These things are, it's nothing necessarily that new. And even Reading Muslim, mashallah, it's an amazing effort. And I think what you've done is like, you've used some really, really simple, clean technologies that are not necessarily cutting edge or new, but you've used them to their maximum potential by, like, leveraging it and getting people on board through your values and through the values of others who have joined. What do you think is the future of the technologies that will help our communities, and to kind of help the conversation along and give you like an idea of what I'm kind of thinking about is, it could be things like artificial intelligence or automation and things that, it's kind of maybe a little bit hard to fathom now, but I think it's inevitable that at some point in the future, cybernetic systems and like integration and things like that. I don't know. Really, I'm asking you, but like, what do you think the future of these things will be when it comes to our faith and our communities?
It's funny, you've kind of dropped in that key word right as I asked the question. I think technology-wise, it is going to be parallel to what you see in the tech startup world.
Yeah.
You are going to see forms of artificial intelligence and machine learning and potentially some VR or AR in this world. How exactly that will work, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But to be fair, I'd love to have that in Reading Muslim as well. I'd like us to be able to invest in a tech team who can be really innovative and think outside the box and see how we can do something that's very unique and different.
Yeah.
And then hopefully not being able to just push that out to Reading, but also expand that to the rest of the country and the rest of the globe.
Yeah, like so you mentioned VR, and I didn't even think of that, VR and AR. But it reminded me of this project which was done for Medina. I think you probably know which one I'm talking about, where if you went to Medina now and you install this app onto your phone, because of how Medina's been developed, a lot of the ancient structures are gone, and you wouldn't know where's what unless a guide took you. And even if the guide did take you and you looked at it, you'd be looking at like a modern 21st century wall or building it, and you wouldn't get the essence of what Medina was like back in the Prophet ﷺ's time. So there's these guys who made an app that you basically kind of hold your camera around, and it will give you like a sort of rudimentary animation, like overlaid onto what your camera sees, and it will tell you, oh, this is what the house of the Prophet ﷺ looked like, and this is where it was, and you point it in this direction, and you'll see like somebody else's house or the site of a battle. And I just thought, wow, that's such a great use of future technologies that can really give us, like, really transport us and give us a sense of what those times were like in a way that maybe hearing the seerah, like, even though hearing the seerah is so important, but it might not have the same power. One thing I asked our mutual friend Shoaib the other day, because he was on the podcast as well, and I proposed to him that right now there exists technologies that are kind of making lawyers redundant, like, because with machine learning and artificial intelligence, it's not impossible that a computer could basically input like lines and lines of legal jargon, and then certain things it could process. So I asked him, I don't know if people are going to start like coming to my house with death threats after I say this, but I suggested to him that um, could a computer potentially, I'm not saying now, but potentially, theoretically, could you feed it, input it with all the sort of fiqh and like rulings on particular issues, and then you as a person ask it a question, and then through some kind of linguistic programming, it can understand what you're asking and then give you an answer. Is that something that is possible? I'm not petitioning for it, by the way. I'm just asking, is it possible?
So here's the thing, right? The answer is yes. It's
Yes.
absolutely possible. But the thing is that that's actually what I'd like to try and achieve.
Oh, seriously? I
Because
didn't think you were going to shut me down.
that is the level of technology that would allow someone to use the tech platform
Yeah.
for changing their daily life
Yeah.
and being more correct in their way of living, right? Because
Yes.
a lot of the times it's just lack of knowledge or access to knowledge, or
Yeah.
the desire to get access to the knowledge.
Yeah.
It's really, we could all go to our local imams and ask them.
Yeah.
They are all open to answer your questions.
Exactly. And it's not necessarily about asking stuff that's so context specific that you would need a person. There's loads of basic things that I feel like the information is out there. People are Googling these things anyway. But if you built a system that is just a little bit more fine-tuned when it comes to linguistics and understanding what a query is, and then being able to find the relevant information, um, it would be the perfect answer, and then you could get it like validated by imams and scholars and stuff potentially. I don't know.
Absolutely doable. Definitely. It's our long-term roadmap.
Yeah, you know what? Your answer is so clear and concise that I feel like that's the end of the conversation. All right, let's go home. Well, we're already home, but do you know what I mean? Like I was kind of almost hoping that you might go, well, there might be some potential pitfalls and things to worry about, but you seem kind of ambitious and confident that it's around the corner.
I think you can technically do it right now. It's just having the team in place.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the time and resource investment that you need.
Yeah.
So in reality, you can do it for across the board of questions. It's just a question of how do you present it back. So for example, if somebody asks you, how do I pray?
Mm-hmm.
You can quite clearly show them how you pray, and then there'll be some variables in it. So what is your school of thought? So
Yeah.
it would have to have an understanding of how it needs to answer the question.
Yeah.
But there might be some other things that it can't answer, and therefore it tells you that, hey, I can't quite answer this, but this is what you can do, or these are the people that you can speak to try and understand more. So essentially, you can answer all questions already. It's just how the answer is going to come across.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you would naturally monitor what the questions are that are coming in. So you would also understand what people are trying to use the tech for.
Sure. I honestly, I love this stuff. Like talking about it, and actually, if it manifests, then using it and being excited about it and sharing it with people. But and I said this with him as well, with Shodul, who was on the podcast. My my wife's gonna hate me because I keep using her as an example, but she has a real aversion to technology. She's not a technophobe because she has a phone, she uses WhatsApp and stuff, but sometimes we'll be having a conversation and I'm watching like a YouTube video and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. She's like, oh, what are you looking at? I'm like, I don't know if I want to show you this because you're going to get upset. And then she's like, no, come on. So I'll show her, and it's like Tesla Autopilot, the latest update. Now it can do corners in a certain way and it can see cones, and it's identifying all these things through visual graphic systems and like artificial intelligence and all, like amazing coding, like the cutting edge of, as far as I understand, the cutting edge of coding and like computer science. And she'll be like, oh God, when, like, what's going to happen? Are people eventually going to like, stop walking and cars are going to do everything for them? And, people, it's going to be like that dystopian future in that Disney film Wall-E. You remember Wall-E, where like everyone is fat and just sat in like these chairs that float around and they got TV screens and but when you hear that, what do you say to people who have that aversion to technology? Because there is people like Elon Musk who almost I don't know where he really stands because he's way more clever than I am, but he seems to be someone who is in technology in the industry and still talks about how hey we should be a little bit careful, as someone like yourself who is in the tech industry who is as invested as you are, but also a spiritual person. Where do you draw the line? Do you draw the line, or are you just like fully committed to a technological future?
It's a really interesting question, and I'm going to make this a bit more difficult in a moment.
Please, so, I love it.
I think I obviously don't have the aversion to technology. I love technology, and I think it's great. It should be utilized in the right way to improve lives. So autopilot, for example, is a tech which is very, very young at the moment, and it's being tested. And it's really clear from Tesla's messaging that you have to still be completely alert, because right now it is possible for the car to do something completely random, and it shouldn't behave that way.
How dare you?
So I think that's the thing that people are scared
How
of.
dare you?
That's right.
I'm just joking. Carry on, sorry.
So yeah, it's a very tricky one, because when you put on something like autopilot, you will naturally switch off your focus because you're not having to be engaged.
Yeah.
So for example, if you're driving from Reading to, let's say, Newcastle, if you're the driver, you're going to be fully alert because, well, you've got something on your mind. But if you're the passenger, you're going to doze off every now and then because you're not having to do anything other than just be there in the car. And 5 hours can be a long time. So yeah, I think that balance of getting autopilot right and keeping the driver alert is going to be very tricky. Fortunately, that's not my technology challenge, so that can be handled by someone else. I think the spiritual side is very interesting. I mean, if you go back in time, go back to the time of when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam alayhi salam, right? The angel said, why would you create him? They're going to cause destruction on earth. Right? But Allah said, you don't know what I know. And we're now living in such a fortunate time where we're getting to live this technological revolution. And the technology that we have around us is absolutely unimaginable just a few decades ago. Right? Like if you hold your smartphone up and you think that it has many times the power of previous computers, and it's such a small thing, which has so much battery power in it, it lasts all day, if not two. And it's got a camera that can take pictures that are up to 100 megapixels now, which means you can zoom in so far that your eyes can't even see that far naturally. And we're only in 2020, so it's still quite early in the tech revolution. So I think it's not a problem for us to create these technologies. That was the whole purpose of what we were meant to do. We are creatures of knowledge, and we create things. For me, what's actually scary is what happens when you suddenly lose knowledge. Like in this lockdown period in the US, we found examples of legacy systems that were coded in COBOL, and people who knew how to code in COBOL, they have stopped working. They're just retired now. So when things go wrong, how do you fix it? If you think about computer chips, the ones that go inside your computer or inside your phone, they're tiny, tiny little things, right? They use 5-nanometer processors. I can't even show you how small 5 nanometers is. It's whatever I show you, it's going to be too big. Now, in order to have made that in the first place, you would have had to have a machine to make the machine, to make the machine, to make the machine, to make the machine, and so on and so forth, to get down to that level of precision. Now, how that knowledge has come about is phenomenal, right? And
Hmm.
again, we're still only a certain amount into that journey of what that future holds. And therefore, we can't even imagine what that future might look like.
Yeah, that's
Um,
the thing.
but I did say I'm going to make this more tricky. So,
Yeah.
that side of technology, I think is quite straightforward.
Hmm.
Where it becomes more tricky, and again, the differences of opinion comes in, and I probably won't give you my opinion in this call,
Yeah.
is things like lab grown meat.
Oh, yes.
Now, when you grow meat, which is artificial,
Hmm.
but it's technically still the same DNA,
Yeah.
then it is meat, but it hasn't come from an animal
It
that's been.
hasn't lived. Yeah.
Now, there's difference of opinion in that as well with the scholars.
Yeah.
Um, but those are the questions which are fairly earth-shattering. They're quite major
Yeah.
differences, and it's tricky to see how we might navigate ourselves across that.
What do you think is going to be the key to being uh, well equipped to deal with that reality? Like, if say these things are going to come about in our children's generation, or even say like down the line for us, what's the best line of defense for at least being able to navigate that landscape?
So I think it's already here. It's it's definitely cheap enough
Yeah.
to be able to go in there. So there's two parts of it. I think initially we first have to look at uh, the movement that's happened over the last few years, in particular, around going towards eating better,
Hmm.
being vegetarian or being vegan. I think as Muslims, it's difficult to be vegan because naturally our religion causes you to also make sacrifices with animals,
Yeah.
and therefore I don't know many Muslims who are vegan or vegetarian, but you can certainly still try to have most of your diet vegan or vegetarian.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's actually a good thing when you think about the amount of resource that's required to farm all of the animals that are required to are required to fill the amount of meat that we buy.
Yeah.
And it's really important to do that, right? And that's why this whole movement has come about in order to try and have lab grown meat. Now, how you go about it the right way is essentially listen to the scholars, right? So we're not educated enough in that sense to be
Hmm.
able to judge which one the right thing is.
Yeah.
Um, Having said that, obviously you're allowed to have your own opinion if you're um, of sane mind and you can make that call, then absolutely you can decide for yourself, and inshallah you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, we should always be open to scholars' opinions, and generally speaking, you should stick to one scholar, right? You can't just pick and choose and
Yeah.
take your own most comfortable path.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One thing that was quite exciting and eye-opening for me a couple years back, or not even actually, it was probably just over a year ago, I had to interview this Imam who he was just doing like a little presentation for a TV channel, Muslim TV channel, and answering some basic, frequently asked questions. Like if I'm fasting, can I take certain medications and things like that. The kinds of questions that we've heard over and over again. They're still important to be asked. Now, when I met him, he seemed like kind of like a cool young guy, and from a different ethnic group than me as well. So, like straight away, I got the sense that okay, his range of understanding and his context can be slightly different to the imams, the traditional imams, the Dobandi imams who I've been used to. Um, and there's some really, really like amazing Dobandi imams. I'm not putting Dobandi imams down or anything, but this brother was, from a different background, different understanding. So I just thought, oh, maybe he's going to have a view on some of these questions. So I asked him about, specifically, it was about, neural link. So Elon Musk's making the technology to be able to like interface with technology much faster, more specifically like by it interacting with your brain, right? And so I asked him, thinking, maybe he might not know what I'm talking about and not know how to approach the question. But he was already like way ahead of me, and not only did he know what Neuralink was, but he was already like in touch with, or at least well read in people who are answering the questions right now. And so he showed me this book, and it was The Ethics of Biomedicine. And he, he let me take a picture of the book. He had the book on him, and he kind of just gave me the indication that, with a lot of things, that if ultimately good comes out of it, then the beauty of Islam is that it never opposes anything, so long as like some fundamental things are not crossed, and that the ultimate thing is that good comes out of it and not bad, and not like exploitation of people or labor, or of breaking any of the fundamental laws of Allah, like like harming people, lying, alcohol, these kind, pork and things like that. And even in those cases where a human life needs to be preserved, you can still like break some of these fundamental laws. So I was just like blown away by the fact that there are scholars who are looking into these questions, because like sometimes when you've only ever like been to your local masjid and spoken to an imam about how to read qaida or whatever, you kind of get the sense that maybe we're behind. But actually, what's so beautiful about our faith is that it doesn't tell you to shy away from these questions. And for anyone who might be listening and thinking, oh, we're going to fall behind and stuff, I would say definitely not. Like there are people who are looking into these things, and they always will be. So 100% agree with you. Like, go to your scholars and speak to them, and even if they don't know about it, tell them about it, because then they can like start understanding, okay, how do we approach this? But yeah, man, I'm more excited about the future than I am scared. There is some stuff that maybe we won't get into in this conversation that I have like some theories about. Like Peter Thiel is like looking into trying to live forever. Like these giant tech magnates who are like investing in technology that can prevent death and all this type of stuff, and how it correlates with some things that we've heard about what's going to happen in the end times. But maybe that can be a conversation for another day, or maybe that conversation will never happen on air.
I mean, it's a really interesting topic. I'll briefly touch on it if I may. So I think
right, please.
What's important to remember is that life and death sits only with Allah, right?
Yes, yeah.
So, for example, if you think something like a major operation on your heart, right? At one point, somebody would have to develop the medical understanding and the technology to be able to cut open someone's heart and fix it. And there would have been debate around this. Can you cut someone open? Can you fix something which Allah has made that way?
Mm-hmm.
But again, number one rule is going to be the preservation of life, right?
Yeah.
Now, you won't be able to guarantee that you can preserve that life. Whether that life is preserved or not is up to Allah, right?
Yep.
Now, we're seeing that obviously in this pandemic where lots of people are going on ventilators. Some people who were like, I'm sorry, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to come out because you're old, you've got illnesses. They're coming out a couple of weeks perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And it goes to show again that that life isn't given to you by the machine that breathes for you.
Yeah.
The machine's turned off. You might still live. It's not up to the doctor to think whether you're going to live or not.
Yeah.
It's all up to Allah, right? So in that same context, whether you're going to be able to extend your life or not, absolutely possible through technology. And if you think in recent times, over the last few decades, our lifespan average has gone up generally.
Yeah.
That's through better living. Now you can use technology for better living, right? So that's how it comes about. And there's nothing wrong with that per se.
Yeah.
If you think about people in the olden years, they would have lived for hundreds of years. It's actually now that we live for a really short amount of time, and we're a lot shorter than they were. So we're a lot smaller.
Yeah.
So what we should do is research that. We should understand why has that evolution occurred, and if we reverse that, it's not because we've achieved it; it's because Allah has allowed it to be achieved.
Yeah. So, I really appreciate that kind of optimistic viewpoint, which really is not blind optimism. It's just trusting that Allah is the governor of all affairs. Like, and it's not that anything happens without His knowledge. And sometimes I feel like people get, especially like with this coronavirus pandemic, people get very doom and gloom, and they forget that, Allah has ordained everything, and His wisdom and judgment is the best. And if that is the case, then there's nothing really to worry about. Um, but like obviously, we still need to make preparations so that we're not taken by the current of the river, but we still have some ability to navigate what He's sent. Um, so yeah, like just closing, I guess we're coming up to an hour, and I know your time is very valuable, so I don't want to keep you too long, but just to ask you, on this kind of like final note of optimism, what do you think people should, like in terms of specifically, I know, it would be very easy to just say what should people do, and you could easily say to people like read Quran and do dhikr and things like that, but specifically because of your expertise, I would say, what area of technology do you think people should be a little bit more clued up on, so that they are better equipped for a future where they can understand things a little bit better? Or
Interesting.
even to rephrase, what is an area that you are looking at for your own life and for your family that interests you and that you think has merit in it, in learning or being a little bit clued up on?
Interesting. I think, um, again, technology being an enabler here, it gives you easier access to right answers, but
Yeah.
the questions still need to come from within you. So
Mm.
you need to think about, what can I change, those little things in your life, and then ask the questions. I don't think that's ever going to change. There's always going to be the same. That's the human nature. So, for example, you've been taught to pray, probably by your parents and maybe the imams.
Yeah.
But in that, either through by accident not learning it properly, or over time you might have changed how you've prayed. But then you just need to ask yourself sometimes, am I doing this bit correctly? Go research the fiqh. What should I be doing at this point? Um, so those are the things I think that people should be doing. And just because you've mentioned it, I want to briefly just touch on how we can have the right mindset.
Yeah.
I think it takes a lot of time and energy to get to that kind of level. But for me, what works really well is just remembering that before we came into the world, we made a promise to Allah that we would succeed in this test.
Mm.
And this test of dunya, right? This life, which is so short, and therefore try to have that remembrance of Allah throughout whatever problems that you have, and that's why calamities come upon us, so that we can go closer to Allah. And remember that everything that you do, you're only doing it for the purpose of getting to the hereafter. So that should help you in saying, what I really want to achieve is at all times being ready for death. Now, if you can be ready for death, you're in the best state that you can be. Now, throughout this pandemic in particular, we're all having that feeling, well, everyone's just dropping off the face of the earth like flies. We need to be prepared for death. Subhanallah.
Well, I think that's, yeah, what an amazing thing to end on. I won't say too much more because I don't want to spoil that awesome final message. So, Imtiaz, man, I really enjoyed this conversation. I had a lot of fun. I hope you had fun. Thank you for your
Absolutely.
time.
It's been good. I look forward to another time.
Yeah, we definitely have to do another one. So yeah, thanks for that time. And if people want to like sort of connect with you and like get in touch with you and follow you, I don't know, like are you public with your social media? Like, would you want to share any of your social medias?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn. So Imtiaz Chowdhury, and you can find my Instagram profile as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You have some really good pictures as well, by the way.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for inviting me on, and great podcast series that you're doing here. So continue success, inshallah.
Cool. All right, bro. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.